Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. I'm Paul Clark and welcome to my studio. So, what have I got for you lovely lot today? Well, we're going to have a look at painting those lovely wet in wet water reflections and how water reacts on a lake. And this could also be one from my series of Around the World in Watercolour. So we're going to be painting this lovely scene from Lake Como in Italy. So come and join me and we'll paint this step by step together. And here's the reference photo, and I'd like to say a very big thank you to John for sending this to me. It's of the Ponte della Severa on Lake Como. And for today's material, my paper is some Mead & Watercolour paper, cold press finish, 100% cotton. It's 300 GSM. It's on a block, so it doesn't need stretching, but of course any decent watercolour paper will do. And my colours today have cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, cadmium orange, alizarin crimson, cobalt blue, phthalo blue and some Payne's grey. And the brushes from my range is a 3/4 inch flat, number 12, number 6 round and my trusty number 3 rigger. And here's the pencil sketch, and if you want to download the free traceable you can do that from my website, a link in the description below. Off we go, and I'm starting using my flat brush, wetting this background area with, well, cleanish water. A flat brush is perfect for painting along these straight edges. Next, with my number 12 brush, I'm painting in some cobalt blue straight into the wet and leaving a gap of white in the middle there, because if you look at the reference photo there's definitely the suggestion of a waterfall there, and I've checked on Google Maps, there's definitely one there. And while it's still wet, getting in that distant tree, and I'm using my normal mix of cadmium yellow and cobalt blue for my greens. And drying off my brush here just to make sure I lift out any paint that's in that waterfall area. And you can see I'm using a good mix of bluey greens and yellowy greens. And a very light watery touch here of Payne's grey. Buildings here are definitely in the background, so I'm still keeping them light and out of focus, going in wet in wet. And here I'm just trying to bring out the contrast of the waterfall just by adding this little touch of dark value Payne's grey, but still keeping everything nice and soft. Next, now we have to make a decision on painting the yellow walls. Now, do we leave gaps where the green ivy is? Well, the thing is, we know that green contains a lot of yellow already, so there's no reason why we can't just lay the green directly on top, especially as it's a darker value colour anyway. So I'm going to paint the walls in this goldy colour mix as if the greenery doesn't exist. Then when that's dry, we can add the ivy on top. And again, a flat brush is great for going around those straight edges. And just a touch of orange for the roof here. Now, referring to my reference photo again, look at those lovely dark values around the shape of those buildings. That's really going to help them pop out. So using my normal green mix again, and I'm using the dry brush technique to try and get some nice texture at the edges of these trees here. Nice and wet. Lots of big broad brush strokes. Adding a bit more blue into the mix for this darker green. A little bit of splatting here for some details on the edges. And a nice strong dark green mix in here to create that contrast. Now I use my normal green mix but added in some Payne's Grey. Let's splat in some more random texture. It's just a great way of getting colour into your mixes without disturbing the paint with your brush. And here I'm just taking my number 6 brush and dropping in little dollops of clean water, hopefully to force some backgrounds or cauliflowers for some lovely random mottled effects. And all the same colours and techniques for the trees on this side. And here I'm just sprinkling in very sparingly a few granules of table salt, hopefully to get some nice leafy effects. I missed out this little tree here, which helps to define the edge of this building. Right, so now we can paint this ivy directly on top. Mind you, it might not be ivy, I'm not sure what it is. Of course, you know I love adding in some splatting to give that suggestive detail. Now with a light wash of Payne's Grey and my number 12 brush, I'm adding some texture to the walls. And you can see now it's dried that lovely leafy effect that's been created by the salt. So just continuing on with the Payne's Grey to get that lovely stone texture. And just painting in these details as well as the stone bridge in the same colour. Now it's time to add that little splash of colour, and I think it's this lovely reddish colour which just brings the painting to life. And I'm using my number 6 brush for all these shutters and doors and windows. Okay, so now it's time to get in all that lovely detail. So number 6 brush again and some Payne's Grey. And I'm painting here with a brush on its side to pick up some of that sort of dry brush texture, which is great for rocks and stones. So now we need to let this totally dry. So it's a perfect time for a short break, and it's got to be a glass of one of Italy's favourites, Barolo.
Paul, have you seen the red wine?
Okay, so now it's time to paint the lake, and I'm starting just by wetting with clean water the entire lake area. Now you can see from the reference photo that the lake itself has definitely got a turquoisey feel, so I'm starting by painting in these vertical bands of phthalo green. Now, the sharp-eyed amongst you may have noticed in my list of materials at the start I showed phthalo blue instead of phthalo green. So I was just testing to see if you're paying attention. Also, you could use Viridian, which is very similar. And here just adding in a touch of cadmium yellow, but it is vitally important that all of these washes go in while it's still wet. And I'm keeping that centre area nice and light. And I'm lining up all those dark values with some Payne's Grey, again quick vertical stripes. Now, I'm often asked, do I paint with my board at an angle? Yes, it's usually about a 10 to 15 degree angle, about the thickness of a paperback book. Then I'm tilting my board up to an angle of about 45 degrees and letting the paint slowly run down. So I'm just going to add that little bit of outer focus tree over there on the left, starting by just putting in some clean water, then dropping the colour in wet in wet. Right, now for the details on these windows and shutters, and I'm using exactly the same colour as I used before, but a much darker, thicker consistency, and again using my number 6 brush. Now for some details over here on this building, and again I'm trying to paint these with one brush stroke if I can, keeping it nice and loose and letting your brush just flow and move quickly. these are just little balconies sticking out, but I'm just really trying to keep it simple and not try to put in too much of the detail. Here, just a little shadow coming from the wall and some shadows just sweeping diagonally across the building. So I don't really know what's going on with this building here in the distance, so it's all very loose and impressionistic. Now for the insides of all these windows, and I'm using a nice thick mixture of Payne's Grey. Okay, so now that the lake area has totally dried, I'm just coming in with some dark shadows under the foliage here. And again, I'm using my number 6 brush, quick short dabby strokes. And of course we must put in that lovely dark area in this arch here. And if you look at the reference photo, it's probably the darkest area in the whole picture. And for the suggestion of these tiles on the roof here, I'm using a watery burnt sienna. Next, I'm just taking my number 6 brush again and just adding a few little details onto this ivy bush type thingy here. Next, it's time to get out my trusty number 3 rigger. And I'm going to be using it for painting all these little sort of brick details on this building here. Less is more. We don't need to put in every single one. Oh, and I've just spotted this little balcony railing up here, and again the rigger's the perfect brush. Okay, so now it's time for the ripples in the water, and I'm using a 50-50 mix of Payne's Grey and Phthalo Green. And it's all about getting that thin brush stroke, and that's achieved just by quickly skimming your brush along the surface of the paper and lifting off with every stroke. And a brush with a fine point is essential for this. Now, I don't want to cover up that wet and wet wash that we've already painted, so I'm keeping these ripples to a minimum, not as many as you can see in the reference photo. And it's important that the width of them widens as we come towards the bottom of the painting. Right, so just to keep things slightly soft, I'm just giving a light spray with some clean water. Next, when everything is dry, I'm using the lifting out technique to create these soft edge ripples of light, just using clean water and dragging my brush back and forth several times and then lifting out with a tissue. Next, it's mixed media time, and I'm using a yellow-green pastel pencil, and I'm just adding in some light coloured leaves and foliage, especially in those dark areas. Next, I'm using a white pastel pencil for some highlights, and what I like about using these is you can smudge with your finger and get these nice soft edges. Now, I've often been asked what I do with my finished paintings. Now, some I like to keep and some I sell. So, just to let you know, and I don't want to sound like this is blatant commercialism, most of my paintings from my YouTube tutorials are for sale, with the price in the description below.
Get on with it.
Okay. Next, it's time to get out the magic scalpel, and this will give you some really nice high white glistening effects. There we go, all done, and this one in just over 3 hours, not including drying time. No, wait, hang on, there's just a couple of things that I missed out, like this little lantern here, which I think is a nice little feature. And also, I always think some cables add a nice little touch. Just try and do them with one quick swoop. Yep, this time I think we really are finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll give it a go. And you know I'm going to say it, always make it your own and try and enjoy the experience. And just a quick reminder, if you're interested in any of our holidays, workshops or retreats, please look in the description below. I know a lot of them are sold out, but we have some spaces still left on our painting retreat in Ibiza in March, so please check those out. And in the meantime, please don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already. It is free. Leave a comment. I do read every single one. I can't always reply to them all. And of course, I look forward to seeing you all again next week for another Watercolour Wednesday. Take care now, everyone.